Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Basement Radio K Podcast, BRAP. Want to give a big thank you to everyone in the live chat. Thank you, everyone, for coming by and hanging out with us this evening. Really appreciate the support as always. Please do me a favor and hit the like button. I'm also going to drop a link here in the live chat. Please feel free to share the link on your favorite social media platform. So we do have with us a very special guest this evening. I wanted to talk about, because if you've been following and listening to the show for the past couple of weeks, longer than that actually, for the last, 18 months, we have been covering and discussing Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard King. And with that, we have talked about consolidation. We've talked about mergers, acquisitions. We've talked about whether or not consolidation or mergers and acquisitions have been good for consumers, not just in gaming, but in other industries. So this is why we wanted to bring on this guest this evening. We have with us Matt Stoller, who's actually also an author of Goliath, which is a book about it's the 100-year war between monopoly power and democracy. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. No, my pleasure. And so Matt, for those for the listeners who aren't familiar with the work that you've done or what you do professionally, could you give us a little bit of background on what you do professionally, and some of the more recent work that you've done in terms of authoring books and so forth?
Yeah, so I'm a writer. I focus on a particular area of law called antitrust law, but I've done a number of different things. I got interested in monopoly power because I was working in Congress during the financial crisis in 2008. I was working for a member on the Financial Services Committee, and the banks were crashing the world, and we looked around and we were like, well, these too big to fail institutions seem like a problem. And then after, don't worry, we fixed it all. It's all good now. And then after the crisis, a bunch of us looked around and said, oh, wow, there's actually a lot of consolidated power all over the place in our economy. And so we started to chronicle it, look at how, look at it in everything from like getting chocolate bar on shelves, which is really hard to do now because of monopoly power, to, pharmaceutical middlemen, to like, there's monopolies in cheerleading, there's consolidated power in airlines. There's like all over the place you see like America has there's concentrations of systemic feature of the American economy at this point, and it wasn't in 40 years ago or so. So what I do is I'm at a think tank, which is called the American Economic Liberties Project, and we write reports about this problem and the legal tools that we can use to address it. And I have also written a book called Goliath, the 100-Year War Between Monopoly Power and Democracy. And then I write a newsletter called The Big Newsletter, where I chronicle how America and policymakers are dealing with market power in different segments. So that's kind of what I do. That's who I am.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. And also want to welcome Game Logic, also known as Hamp. Hamp, hope you're doing well this evening. Great to have you on the panel as always.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
All right. So I want to discuss kind of how we got here, Matt, because, Hamp and I were talking. It's funny. You mentioned the financial crisis and the bailout of the financial institutions. And I was kind of ranting with Hamp earlier today. I'm like, we bailed out these big institutions, kind of on the back of taxpayers. And, I've kind of always thought, well, that's not really how capitalism is supposed to work. But how do we get here? I guess when I think about, big mergers, acquisitions, and I think the first one, well, I always go back to like, was it GTE, AT&T, and telecom, some of the mergers that happened there. And then the one that really, where I think I started really paying attention to some of this stuff was ExxonMobil, when those two behemoths in oil and gas merged, which I was like, when I remember, and I forget what year it was, but I was probably maybe in my early 20s, I think. But
I believe.
Was it 98?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was 21. So in my early 20s. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like how did this happen? How does this happen? And then, as we progress through as I think back at big tech, the rise of big tech, and what we see today with the big five: Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft. And we'll talk about Microsoft here in a little bit. How do we get here? I mean, there seems to be consolidation everywhere. We're seeing it in Hollywood right now. We actually had a Canadian actor on last week discuss the SAG-AFTRA strike that's happening here in the U.S. and he gave us a little insight into the entertainment industry and what it's like to be an actor. But I think about the big five and the FTC's role and how we got here, and I feel like we're kind of at an inflection point too with regulation of technology now, or the big tech sector. But how do we get here as a country though? How do we get here with mass consolidation where it seemingly seems like you mentioned there's consolidation in cheerleading and pharmaceutical and healthcare and entertainment. Now, video gaming, I've always thought was kind of that last frontier where we've had consolidation, we've had acquisitions, but nothing at the level of an $80 billion merger of arguably one of the biggest publishers in the gaming industry. How do we get here?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny with ExxonMobil. Let's put together Standard Oil again, right? I mean, that's what effectively it was. America has a long history of a long anti-monopoly tradition, and the basic. And this, you go back to the 1600s in England and find the roots of it. But the basic idea is that you don't want anyone to have too much power, because if someone has too much power, they're a threat to free institutions and free people. And the other kind of general principle is you don't want people to have to face conflicts of interest, right? It's in the Bible, no man may serve two masters. So those are the basic ideas behind the anti-monopoly principles. And America's always been pretty good about addressing monopolies. But in the 1970s and 80s, there was sort of a series of debates and decisions by policymakers where they kind of threw those principles away and said, actually, we don't care about concentrations of power and conflicts of interest. Really, what we care about is efficiency, and in particular, the low consumer prices in the short term. And there were a bunch of reasons for that, but it was an ideological fight. And there were people on the right who developed a lot of the legal tools to actually facilitate consolidation. They were known as the Chicago School. And then there were people on the left. This sort of a quasi-socialist vibe, the consumer rights movement, a lot of the Ralph Nader people. They believed in consolidating power as well because they thought, well, it'll be easier for the government to tell a small group of corporations what to do than to have to deal with all of these small businesses. So there's different reasons for it, but both of them were attacking the kind of anti-monopoly tradition, and they successfully did attack it. And so what you saw in 1982 was the Reagan administration just stopped enforcing merger law. They came out with new merger guidelines. They knew that antitrust laws were popular, so they were like, we can't get Congress to change it, so instead we'll just stop enforcing it. And that's what they did. And they had stopped enforcing a bunch of laws. But that's why you started to see massive consolidation in the 80s, right? In everything from defense to retail to banking. That's like that movie Wall Street that was about a merger, the Oliver Stone movie.
Greed is good.
And good movie. And then you roll it forward. The Clinton administration accepted this basic framework, so you had tremendous consolidation across the board. And then but it wasn't just like rivals buying rivals. You also had companies buying up every part of the industry, so buying up their suppliers and buying up their customers, and that's like in Hollywood, for example, Disney, which was making basically films and TV shows that they were selling to TV channels, and they also had theme parks. They bought ABC, which owned a bunch of of channels. So they moved from just creating content to actually being a distributor of content. And that's not about like buying necessarily a rival. It's about it's actually about extending their control throughout the industry, and that's what you saw across the economy. And so that was a philosophical choice to prioritize efficiency above dealing with concentrations of power, and to basically prioritize thinking about who we are as consumers instead of as citizens. So, what you could see in the Microsoft case, right? So, like, all right, since the financial crisis, you've had a bunch of people say, "Hey, wait a second, this is a bad thing," right?
Yeah.
And like Lena Khan was one of them, and she's the head of the Federal Trade Commission now. But she basically wrote up, "Look, we changed our interpretation of antitrust laws, and so you have the creation of a lot of these dominant firms." And she made her kind of career writing about Amazon, but she wrote a bunch of things before that about seeds and chemicals, airlines, candy, whatever. But what happened in 2019 and 2020 is there was this long investigation that Lena Khan was actually part of in Congress of these four dominant tech firms. Microsoft was not actually in there. And just saying why is society run by Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook? And they went through millions of documents and looked through, interviewed a lot of people, both in the firms and also competitors. And they wrote a report saying, here's how the market structure of these institutions work. And this was a congressional report. And then tried to strengthen antitrust law, made some improvements, but ultimately didn't change the underlying substantive case law. And then, Biden wins and he appoints Lena Khan to be the chair of the FTC. And there's a bunch of things going on at the FTC that go way beyond big tech and video games. That's what one of the main things that people are focused on. But but they're doing stuff in pipelines and sports retail and like pet care and pharmaceuticals and defense contracting, like all over the place. They're doing a ton of stuff. They also do a lot of consumer protection. But this deal between Microsoft and Activision was a classic, a very large, but a classic merger that the people in the 1980s going forward said, this is totally fine. This is good. Right? Because what Microsoft is going to do when they buy Activision is they're going to take their different games and they're going to charge less to Xbox people who use the Xbox or various Microsoft platforms. And why wouldn't we want them to charge less? Right? That's a good thing. That's more efficient. That's a lower price.
Yeah.
And that is one way to understand what was happening. And the other way to understand what was happening was, the traditional reading of the antitrust laws. This is a law called the Clayton Act that was passed in 1913 or 14, but then was updated in 1950. And it's very explicit. It was updated in 1950 to address corporate concentration per se, and it's a law that's probabilistic. You don't have to prove that a merger will lead to a monopoly. You just have to prove that it may substantially lessen competition. Those are the actual terms. And what the law was supposed to do, and what our case law from up and really until the late 70s was to say, look, if the industry is consolidating, right, and there's a lot of like mergers and acquisitions, there's trends towards monopoly, then you should be really careful. And they also said, sure, rivals buying rivals is dangerous, but also if you're like trying to extend your control over the whole industry, that can be a problem as well. And that's because what they were trying to do was prevent, what you're seeing in Hollywood right now, which is like kind of a series of walled gardens versus like a set of open markets. So Hollywood, you have these different walled gardens, and it's really bad for the industry itself. It's also really bad for everybody who participates in the industry. Like movies aren't as good. And it's highly consolidated. That's what the Clayton Act was supposed to prevent, but the modern readings of it don't allow for that. So that's what The Microsoft case was like, okay, if you allow Microsoft to buy Activision, then the whole industry is going to rapidly tip into like tremendous consolidation, and you'll basically just have one or two walled gardens running, like organizing all of video gaming. And that's bad, right? You don't
Hmm.
want like a walled garden run by a small group of people making decisions about the terms in this industry. But the judge looked at it and she said, "No, I buy the consumer price argument, the efficiency argument. I don't buy the reading of the law as it was originally written." And that's what happened. And you can see like you do you there haven't been a lot of challenges. I mean, really since the early '80s they don't the enforcers didn't bring challenges to mergers like this, and they didn't
Yeah.
bring monopolization claims. They were just like, oh, this stuff is totally fine. And so for the first time in like 30, 40 years, you actually have enforcers that are bringing these kinds of challenges, and the courts are, I would say, generally not receptive to them. But that if you think it's illegal and you think it's going to consolidate an industry, you have to bring the challenge. And I thought it was a good case that they brought, but the judge read it in a way that I think is like pretty unrealistic.
Hmm.
Um, so we have we've made a lot of progress in terms of making an argument for why we shouldn't be in like too big to fail society. And I think a lot of people buy the arguments, but we still have to convince the judiciary. So that's where we are right now.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. You talk about like we talked about a precedent on this show quite a bit, and I heard you talk about this on Sacred Symbols. That this case not only sets a precedent for gaming, because we've talked about one of the things we said when this deal was being debated. We said this sets a precedent, and a lot of the it's interesting like people who are I guess you could say very pro Xbox consumers argued, well, Activision, it's not illegal. It's not a legal deal. There's nothing wrong with this. And but if they buy like another publisher, like an EA or Take Two, then that's a problem. And I'm like, well, no. I mean, you get to the EA acquisition, you get to the Take Two acquisition through this precedent. And I do think that this does establish a precedent. I don't think Microsoft. I think I heard you say this on Sacred Symbols too. That Microsoft's they're not done buying either maybe publishers or other studios. I don't think they're done either. But I do think this does set that precedent where if Microsoft goes back and says, "Hey, we want to buy another publisher," isn't that kind of an uphill battle for the FTC now, the DOJ? If now that precedent's been set in the gaming industry to say, "Hey, we need to kind of reverse the car a little bit, rein this thing back in a little bit."
Well, it's a good question. I think that you don't. It isn't necessarily Microsoft that's going to buy like Take Two. It could be like Google buys Sony, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be something like that, or Apple buys Sony, right? Because they're just like, well, we want in on this platform, and like Apple is considering the rumors about Apple buying Disney, which is the same thing, right? And I think your overall point is that the industry is clearly going to consolidate if this
Yeah.
ruling stands, and maybe it will stand. And the FTC may appeal it. The risk with an appeal. So right now it's at a district court level. It's just like a random judge heard it, and it's kind of like it's got influence, but it's not official case law. But once it goes on appeal, if the appeals court upholds the decision, then it becomes like official law. So it's a real tricky question for the
Mm-hmm.
FTC. Do they actually appeal it or not?
Okay.
It is on appeal, but they may not. They may choose not to sustain that appeal. Um, but your point is valid. It's like, okay, so if Microsoft buys like Activision, why couldn't they buy EA or Take Two? What is basically the same logic. Why would that one be illegal if buying Activision wasn't illegal? Or Sony, making acquisitions, or Google buying. I mean, like, like if the judge, ruled that this is fine, is the next judge going to say, well, that other judge was just wrong? Like, judges don't like to do that. They like to pretend that there's some continuity between their decisions, because otherwise, like, the law seems pretty arbitrary. And in antitrust, it is pretty arbitrary, unless you just don't enforce, which is kind of what we've been doing. But I think that's really the key point here is this isn't about just like whether Microsoft owns Activision. This is about whether we're going to tip video gaming into a walled garden system, and more broadly, like whether we're just going to facilitate this kind of walled garden business model in lots of different areas. And there have been other decisions that have been similar to this one. Like there was a decision where United Health Group, which is one of the biggest health conglomerates in the country, I think it's actually the biggest one. They have about $200-300 billion a year in revenue.
Yeah.
They bought a company called Change Healthcare, which was like, it's basically the Visa and MasterCard for like pharmacies. And so they're going to get all of this data about what everybody is buying, and so they'll have like, basically they'll be able to like spy on their rivals. And the Department of Justice challenged it and lost. And it wasn't the same kind of case, but the judge was pretty hostile to this notion. And I think what we're seeing with these judges is like, this Judge Corley, was really out of touch. Just like super out of touch with how the world works. And I mean, I don't know video gaming.
Yeah.
She didn't know
her commentary about $1,000 PCs, like everyone has one, was kind of interesting.
That was what was so striking to me is when she said they were asking her about consoles, and she said, well, don't people have like, you could have a gaming PC, right? And they were like, well, you could, but it's expensive. And she said, well, everybody worked from home during the pandemic. And they didn't work on bargain basement PCs. And I was sitting there thinking, I was like, how could you be a judge, right, or in any position of authority, and not realize that not everybody worked from home during the pandemic, right? Like, did you not notice that there were not everybody gets to like sit at home in an office and work? Like, even conceptually, do you like that is a very dangerous position to be in a society where like a whole class, the whole political class, is full of people, who went to elite schools, whose kids are in elite positions, and that in itself is not a problem. Every society has elites, but they're so disconnected from large chunks of society. That's really worrisome. That's what I took away from this is she's just like, a rich like wine mom boomer who like just had no idea how the world works. And it was like, there's just so many of them.
Yeah.
They're just everywhere.
And just to piggyback on that, Matt, I mean, that's a commentary that I've been on for a decade or more, just as I spent a lot of time covering, technology. And so kind of, as Brad mentioned, with us being at this inflection point, we've just had a period of, like I said, 10 or more years where there are very pertinent matters of policy that involve these big five tech companies. And, you see it in congressional hearings, you see it in courts, where just very often these topics come up, and just the officials that are in place to adjudicate these matters are just ill-prepared, ill-informed. And I kind of used to, actually, when I started on this show, I kind of had this mindset that, oh, well, they've got youthful staff. I'm sure that they get briefed. I'm sure they get brought up to speed. But I just see, we continuously have a failure and a disconnect of them understanding matters of social media, understanding matters of data collection, understanding matters of privacy, understanding, all of the implications that go along with these big five tech companies that have, as I mentioned on the show, have largely built their influence through acquisitions. Like, when you look at these tech companies, and you really dig down into what have they created versus what they've bought, it is almost 90% acquisitions. Like, each of these companies has created like a very small number of things. Maybe be a little more lenient in that judgment in terms of Apple and its approaches on hardware. But Google has created two things. They've created search and they've created a browser. And other than that, everything else they've acquired. So it's just, when you scrape that reality up against antitrust, anti-competition law, it becomes, a worrisome thing when you then also parry that with, the fact that we have a lot of people in power who are kind of ill-informed, ill-prepared on how to arbitrate these matters.
I mean, there's a level at which it's as a judge, right? You can't expect, or a policymaker, you cannot expect somebody to know everything about every part of society, right? Mm-hmm. You just can't. And so people who are making fun of the lawyers or judges or whoever for not knowing everything about video games, it's like, they have to cover the whole economy. They have to cover, people make fun of members of Congress for not knowing whatever it is their area of the world, but it's like they have to cover everything, right? A gun thing happens, they have to cover that. It's like it doesn't, their job is not to know everything about your particular area. Their job is to respond to voters, and that's what they know, right? A judge is a similar dynamic. But the problem with a lot of the people in these positions of power is that they have a bad philosophy. They generally trust dominant corporate actors. They generally trust powerful bankers. They generally trust, like when the CEO of Microsoft testified and, said, oh, we would never do this thing that is, clearly profitable. She not only believed him, but she said that is evidence that they wouldn't do it because he said they wouldn't. And that's a basic philosophy. I think Obama had that philosophy too, where he just they just trust people with power. Mm-hmm. And that's a very boomer thing. They look at institutions and they're like, oh yeah, of course. I guess rich boomers think this way. They're like, oh yes, of course, everything is, oh, well, he went to Harvard. He must be very smart. Or, oh, he was the top, economist. So he knows what's going on. And it's just sort of did you not notice the financial crisis? Did you not notice this constant set of shitstorms? Mm-hmm. And the answer is they kind of didn't, right? Or they looked at them, they're like, oh, well, things happen and, who could have known, right? And it's just there's that level of delusion, right? It's a philosophical problem where they're just disconnected from reality. You can learn all the other stuff. You can learn about privacy. You can learn about data. You can learn about video games. You can learn about all this stuff, or you can learn enough to make reasonably good legal decisions. But you can't learn a philosophy of power that makes sense if you have the wrong set of ideas about how the world works. And that's what I think was really clear about this particular judge. But I've seen it with other judges too. They're just, the conveyor belt to the judiciary is just poisoned.
Wow, that's interesting.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does. And the other thing too that when you talk about the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, saying we're not going to take anything away, and the judge taking his word. I mean, and that's and as consumers, I think as a consumer, I should say, the one thing that really was a head scratcher for me throughout this process, and seeing some of the dialogue, the discourse on Twitter and on podcasts, and people were saying we're running with, the talking points from Microsoft. Clearly had their what I refer to as their social media street team out and pom-pomming and championing this acquisition. I forget to Logic. What's her name again from Activision? Well, I should know her name.
Lulu Chang Messervy.
Yes, she was out there, on social media lots, campaigning for this deal and saying how it's great for gamers, and people were just eating that up and taking her word for it. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is Microsoft we're talking about. This is them acquiring this, and we've talked about this a lot on the show, Game Logic, a top 7 publisher in the gaming industry. Microsoft themselves are a publisher, which is kind of interesting. I don't believe that could be. I don't think that point was ever brought up throughout this through the hearing, that Microsoft, in fact, not just a platform holder, but also a publisher. And I know, Logic, you said that maybe this isn't necessarily a vertical merger per se, right? I think that was one of the things you mentioned in your recent blog.
Yeah, so I've written a lot on Twitter, and then additionally posted a thing on my blog, which I think Matt, sorry, was when we kind of crossed paths. Was, like I said, going back and looking at cases in the 1960s that the FTC filed. I think Procter and Gamble was one of them, and I forget what the other one was, but looking at events during that time when the judicial system and Congress kind of reconsidered whether or not, I think the Procter and Gamble one was them. Was them, I think, looking at buying a bleach company. I can't remember if it was exactly Clorox or not, but yeah,
it was Clorox.
Yep. And the point there was, Procter & Gamble was also a competitor to Clorox. It wasn't just a notion of, buying a company that would supply a capability that they didn't already themselves have. And then there were concerns, even back then about, what happens when, what does that mean in terms of competition when Procter & Gamble's approach is, rather than trying to compete with Clorox, right, that they would just acquire them. And then what that would mean in terms of the power that they would wield, as a supplier, in the exchange, in the free market system and in the exchange barter system, given that they would then combine the power of that product along with their great financial base and particularly their marketing potential.
Yeah, I think that's right. The case was there wasn't, the Supreme Court said, well, this isn't really a horizontal or vertical or conglomerate. This is called a product extension merger. This is Procter and Gamble, Clorox.
Yep.
And they said that there were a couple of claims. One is Procter and Gamble did not make bleach, and Clorox was the dominant firm in bleach. But they were like, Procter and Gamble could make bleach, and so they were potential competition, and Clorox was afraid of that. And so didn't overprice their products. So that was one of the claims. There were other claims there was something called entrenchment, where it's like, all right, who's going to compete against Procter and Gamble and Clorox together, right? Who's really going to try when you have those companies that have such powerful brands and spend so much money on advertising and have such capacity to dominate shelf space. And that was a weren't direct competitors, but they were both working with retailers and distributors, so they're it's a product extension, and they're both very powerful, so combining them would entrench each of their power. So that was I think it was an important case. It's in the antitrust division and the FTC will probably start using that case to make different kinds of arguments, because the argument that they made in the Microsoft case, but a couple of other of these challenges, the vertical challenges, which is called foreclosure, which is to say I'm going to buy a supplier or a customer, and then I'm going to not let my rivals get access to those customers or supplies. Yeah. That's not very persuasive to the courts. The judges just don't buy it anymore. And so you have to find different ways of attacking the problem.
Yeah, which the FTC seemed to focus a lot on with regards to Sony PlayStation, that Microsoft could pull Call of Duty away from PlayStation.
That really was not. I mean, I heard that a lot, and that is actually not what the FTC was trying to prove. It's just that I saw in the opening, you look at the opening statement, the FTC was like, they have all these games, they want to, they're going to move them in different ways to these different platforms, and it's not just about Call of Duty. There are other games that they have. But then the judge was like, well, so this is all about Call of Duty and Sony, right? And so the judge keeps pushing you. If the judge, basically, it's if you're a lawyer, right, and you're arguing a case, and I'm not a lawyer, but my wife's a lawyer, and it's I've seen this happen before. She will prepare a case, and then she'll be like, all right, here are my arguments, and if the judge is like, yeah, no, I think that I know you said, I know that 7 plus 2 is 9. That's what you're saying. But I think 7 plus 3 is 9. And it's like, as a lawyer, like, if you keep just saying 7 plus 2 is 9, the judge is going to stop listening to you. So you have to roll with what the judge thinks. And if the judge is like, well, I don't care about any other stuff. The case here is about like Call of Duty on the Sony PlayStation. It's like, you have a strategic choice. Like, do you try to convince the judge, or do you try to make the reasonable case that makes sense to the world? And it's like, they went and tried to convince the crazy person. Did the case sound good to like non-crazy people? No, but that was a strategic choice because they were facing a crazy person. Like, we weren't the audience. A crazy person was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they had to pivot basically based on the response or behavior of the judge. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I heard this from a lot of different people. They were like, "Oh my gosh, the FTC's case was they should have argued this, they should have argued that, they should have argued this other thing." And it's like, I can make arguments about what they should have done and should have said, but like, I don't care. You're not going to convince that judge. That judge was somebody who was saying, well, why don't you get a summer job to pay for college? Because that's what I did. Like, I'm sorry, but you're not convincing that person of anything. Like, she was just like, this is about Call of Duty on the PlayStation, and I think video games are stupid, by the way. That's the other thing, that was her attitude. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right.
She was like, all this over a shooter is what she said.
Yeah, all this over a shooter game, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, you have a couple of choices there. They could have gone for like, basically just argued for the appeal. And just said like, we know where you're going to rule and we're going to go for the appeal. But the thing is that you don't know what the appeals court would rule, because the judges are generally really bad at this point. I don't know. I just don't know that there was that much that anybody could have done, except Biden should have nominated her because she's terrible.
Yeah. So let me ask you about because you're right. People argued and said different things. The FTC should have done this. I think for me, the concern that I had, and I guess the obvious for me at least, with a company the size of Microsoft acquiring Activision, and then already having Game Pass, right? Game Pass is this cheap entry point into video games. Now you're going to add ABK's portfolio of content to that cheap entry point into the market. And Microsoft has, I think, the ability to do things and leverage, and like we've talked about a lot on this show, Logic is the ability to leverage the adjacencies that they have in terms of cloud, their war chest of money. They can do things that their console competitors just can't. Nintendo doesn't have the infrastructure to compete like with they don't have Azure. Neither does Sony. Sony doesn't have that either. And Microsoft just has these adjacencies, these levers they can pull that these other competitors can't. Is that with Microsoft having the ability to do all those things, Matt? Is that concerning for you? Like, when you look at this deal, like, wait, not only are they getting ABK, but they can just do things because they're Microsoft. They can leverage their adjacencies to make it harder for competitors. I know there was an argument, one of the arguments I saw about the CMA's concern about cloud gaming, cloud being a nascent market, and it's not really a mature market, and nothing, and it's okay for Microsoft to buy ABK, and I'm like, well, I mean, it may be a nascent market, but I would imagine Microsoft owning the content and being able to pull all these leverage these adjacencies that these smaller companies can't. I mean, nascent market or not, you're not even giving those smaller companies or maybe those venture capitalists who are interested in investing in that new market that's emerging the chance to compete. Would you agree with that perspective that Microsoft can do things that these other companies just can and dominate a market that's still in its infancy right now?
I agree with that. Microsoft can do everything but apparently fix the search function in Outlook.
This is true.
Yes, they also control Windows, right? Let's not forget about that.
Yeah, the operators, yeah.
And look, I mean, I made the joke about Outlook, but like, I'm kind of serious. They suck. right? Like they're not good at building things because their business is not predicated upon building quality products. They're very good at their business. Their business is gaining and wielding market power.
Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to kind of go back on is you talked about these larger wall gardens, what we've seen in Hollywood. What are some lessons learned from Hollywood that or things that we see that are happening in Hollywood that could potentially happen in gaming as a result of this acquisition?
What has happened in Hollywood is that you have a few companies that control all aspects of the industry. So it used to be that there were these legal prohibitions of making television shows and running a television network. So the television network on prime time was not allowed to have a financial interest in the show that they were putting on prime time. So their incentive was to pick the best show so they could get the biggest ratings and sell advertising on it. When those rules changed, all of a sudden the incentive is no longer to pick the best show, it's to pick the show that you have a financial interest in. And so it's going to be a worse experience for the audience and a worse experience for the creators because they're no longer competing on a level playing field. And I think you're going to see something similar with video games, where it's a little bit weirder because you've always had like exclusives and things like that. But
yeah,
but as you kind of create this sort of like walled garden dynamic, then the games are going to get worse. There's going to be less good investment in good games, and people with creative ideas are not going to be able to break into the market, and that's just going to be too bad, right? I mean, Call of Duty will be probably cheaper for Xbox users, but people really liked the Marvel movies for a while, and then that's all you get, right? And I think that's kind of where we're headed with video games too.
So you think that there's going to be an impact? It sounds like you think there will be an impact from putting or releasing Call of Duty cheaply into a subscription service. That's going to have a ripple effect in the industry in terms of creativity then?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's just going to be less investment in AAA games, right?
Yeah, and Logic, is that, I know we've talked about the evaluation of software. Is that kind of what I guess your thoughts on the evaluation of software, that is going to happen outside of just the focus by consumers on the priority just being access to software at a cheap price point?
Yeah, I mean, you've hit on, a few dynamics that I've commented on in the past, maybe about three, but I think on this specific one, right, the notion in the issue is what happens when the only product differentiation or the critical product differentiation in a given market solely, right, becomes price. And what I mentioned, a few weeks ago is, we see an increasing size in the block of gamer and the size of the addressable market that seems to be campaigning for and oriented around the only thing they care about is low price of access. And so, what I'm going to say is going to hurt some people's feelings, but I'm going to go ahead and say it, right? And so, frames per second don't matter. Cinematics don't matter. Story doesn't matter. It simply becomes, and we see this all the time, right? I'm going to give this low performance factor a pass because it's in Game Pass and I didn't pay $60 for it, or I didn't pay $70 for it. So you have that market force, right? The other market force you have, and this is one that I've been trying to get people to understand, is on the front end of this thing. Let's just assume some number of games from Activision Blizzard are going into Game Pass. Let's pick Diablo 4. And so normally let me change that to a portfolio argument the way I constructed it the first time. So normally to get access to all of the games, or at least one core game out of each of the kind of IP pillars of Activision Blizzard's portfolio, you would normally pay $400 to $500 to get access, right, to all of those games. And when I say buy all of those games, I mean, not necessarily assuming that somebody's going to buy, Warcraft 3 and sign up for a subscription to World of Warcraft, but that each of the IPs, right, that a person's going to go in and buy one of those. You would normally pay $400 to $500 for access to those. So now you're potentially going to be presented this notion that you're going to have access to a lot of those or some of them for $204 a year. On the front end of this thing, in the short to medium range, what that means is, as a profit and loss center, as a P&L center, there's going to be less money coming into Activision Blizzard than might otherwise normally be coming in. And so what does that mean for Activision Blizzard, and what does that mean for the company, right, in the short term? Well, what that means is, with price becoming the only critical competitive factor and production costs remaining the same, actually increasing, but less revenue coming in, right, what I've said before is, look, Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond, and Matt Booty are not going to take pay cuts, right? So the only way you crunch cost out and start preserving margin as much as you can, right? But this also goes to the fact that, again, Microsoft is a very large corporation, second largest on the planet. They can engage in loss leader, right, competitive practices that other competitors can't. But they're going to start crunching and saving margin by doing things like slowing the pace of salary increases potentially, right? So they aren't gonna scale at their historical pace that they have, because they have to preserve margin because not as much revenue is coming in. They're going to potentially construct team demographics, like in the same way that we saw that apparently was claimed that they had problems at 343, right? Where a large part of the development team were contractors. And how does that save margin? It saves margin because now you're not paying, you don't have fringe hitting the books, right? Because those employees are not being paid benefits. So you do things like that to preserve margin and crunch cost out. Those things start to have an impact on quality. The size and scale of project that you're able to take on doesn't keep pace with the rest of the industry. And the sad thing in software development is the first corner to get cut, with very rare exceptions, is testing, right? So more of that becomes automated, less human beings do it. You do things like, your lower paid end of the workforce, which include a lot of your artists, right? You then, and we see Microsoft making huge investments in AI, right? And these are one of the concerns that are taking place in the industry. A lot of artists' works can be replicated with slight enough iterations that you don't need the total level of effort that you might normally have budgeted for them in a project. So that again starts draining value out of the products that are being made, and those won't necessarily talk about them as being corners cut, but again, those things result in things that this market demographic that is only concerned about low price of access, right, doesn't consider a major defect. So, I mean, those are some of the paths by which we could start to see devaluation of software in the industry.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Logic. Yeah, I guess the other thing I would and Matt, how much time do you have? I know we said an hour when we connected with you.
I have a few more minutes.
Okay. Yeah. I guess the other question I have, Matt, is have there been any instances where mass consolidation of industry has benefited consumers? Because that Logic and I have been talking a lot about this, and we can't think of any off the top of our heads. And that was one of my concerns about this acquisition of Activision by Microsoft. This mass consolidation of the gaming industry for things that both you and Logic have mentioned. But are there any instances where these things have benefited consumers?
It can benefit people in the short term, right? Like,
yeah.
So Disney bought up a bunch of different, like a lot of IP. They bought up like Lucasfilm and Pixar and the Muppets and a couple of others. And, then they come out with Disney Plus, which is cheap, like underpricing it. And all that stuff is available to millions of people for like really low prices. And that's a benefit, right? It's like it was stupid of Disney, and now they're raising the prices substantially. But I think the question is sort of like, has there ever been a merger, big consolidation that sustainably like produced good stuff that wasn't there before, right? That wasn't just about financial engineering or some stupid business strategy or an attempt to monopolize, which is what the Disney thing was about. And I can't think of one. I mean, to the extent that I would, I'd probably go back, and this is going to sound like probably to the 1870s and like the consolidation of the New York Central Railroad. That might have benefited people because you had like a bunch of patchwork railroads that then they knitted into one system that was more efficient. But I don't really see a lot of mergers. I mean, I just don't think like most small mergers are fine, but like honestly, I think most big mergers like shouldn't be allowed to happen. Like not because they're always like creating monopolies, but because they often just like they're just a mess. And I'm not the one who's like McKinsey does studies on this, and McKinsey finds that 70% of mergers just like don't work out for anyone. So it's like I don't know that like these mergers are good really ever. At least the big ones.
Yeah. Yeah,
because we've been doing people keep doing them, and it's like Wall Street and policymakers and people are just used to them happening. It doesn't mean they're good. It doesn't mean they have any value. I mean, I think there was some Nobel Prize winning economist, I forgot what his name is, but I saw him speak, and he basically said, I can't really identify a merger that was necessary, because what I see is that like almost every merger that had anything good you could just do the same thing via contract. Like Microsoft could have just licensed a lot of the Activision games. They didn't need to buy Activision per se, right? Like you can do a lot of the things you want to do with a merger via contract. So I just don't think there are good mergers, not big ones. I mean, small ones are fine, but like there just aren't good big mergers.
Yeah. That's and I think to your point, and you talk about Hollywood and just the impact to creativity there in Hollywood because of these larger walled gardens. That's also my concern too with gaming, that's going to happen. Which I think earlier you said that potentially could be a downstream effect to consolidation in the gaming industry, but no, Logic and I have been thinking about this and having that conversation for the last, I think, a couple of weeks with racking our brains trying to figure out what industries have consolidated have actually benefited consumers. Like we talked about airline industry today. I don't think I've benefited from that. ISP providers, haven't benefited from that. Heck, I think the Logic, where's the U.S. rank in terms of broadband infrastructure? Is it like 10th or something globally?
I'm not sure exactly where they rank, but we're not. I mean, we're not the highest. Yeah,
and that's an industry that's been consolidated. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, admittedly, some of that's challenged, right? Just because of our large geographic sprawl. Other countries that have a smaller geographic footprint, have you could argue that they have an easier time, but. One of the key problems has been, we consolidated the cell phone industry and the broadband industry, and one of the things those companies were supposed to do, not as part of those mergers, but since then those companies have been subsidized to do things like dig, cable and fiber to rural communities, which is a promise that they have not entirely fulfilled, right? To the point where they've been called in front of Congress, and people have tried to levy lawsuits. But the other key battleground is they, through lobbying, have support, gotten states to intervene in municipalities who have tried to erect their own broadband, right, in areas where that problem hadn't been solved for them. and and Comcast and some of the other and Verizon, will increase their lobbying efforts with state governments to have them intervene and send down a judicial decree that will prevent a legislative decree that will prevent those municipalities from providing their own broadband. So, and again, that's a thing that they're capable of doing because of the amount of additional influence and power that was given to them through consolidation. So that's part of the reasons why we are what we are.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, Logic. Well, Matt, I do want to be respectful of your time. I know you said that you had a few more minutes left, so I just want to say thank you again for joining us tonight. Very insightful conversation. Appreciate your time. I don't know if you want to be found on Twitter. If you want to share your Twitter handle, I'll leave that up to you. But if you do, please
sure.
Share
That's
it
Matthew Stoller. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I don't recommend it. Twitter is terrible. But my newsletter's good. That's thebignewsletter.com. You should sign up for that. That's good.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you again for your time.
Thoughtful.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What? No, I just.
Well, Matt, thank you.
I was done.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us this evening. Really appreciate the time.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'll talk to you guys later. All right.
All right. Sounds good. Take care, Matt.
Talk to you, Matt.
Bye.
All right. Big thank you again to our guest, Matt Stoller, this evening. I do have a couple super chats before we wrap up the podcast. Let's see here. I got to go to the super chats here, Logic. We have a $10 super chat from JD Gamer. Says all the judges and lawyers at the hearing and the denied appeal are wrong, and the M&A lawyers that have heard all the information redacted and otherwise all over the world are wrong. I think that's nonsense. Then JD gave me another $10 super chat. Here's a theory: the market will correct itself. When Blockbuster looked at startup Netflix and laughed, but refused to change their business practices, the market spoke, and we no longer have Blockbuster. Actually, Blockbuster's demise was their own doing. There's a Netflix, I believe that is actually a Netflix documentary, not documentation. There's actually a Netflix documentary on that, JD. I suggest you watch that. It's very insightful. It talks about basically Viacom over-leveraged Blockbuster, and it was more their own doing per se than Netflix putting them out of business. So I think that's the only super chat there, right, Logic? I don't think I missed any. Let me double check here.
Yeah, no, the only ones I saw were those two that came by from JD Gamer.
Yeah. I think that was it. So that was a very insightful conversation, Logic. Yeah, again, I wanted to have him on because he provides, I think, a very informed perspective. And heard him on Sacred Symbols, and some of the stuff he was tweeting out. Thought was very insightful. Very has a understanding of history in terms of antitrust, monopolistic behavior. So I thought it was a good time to have him on now that this deal was seemingly closed. So, any Logic, any takeaway or thoughts from our conversation with Matt?
No, nothing other than what we covered already.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I do want to mention one thing, Logic. I don't know if you've been seeing the Starfield advertisement that Bethesda's been rolling out. They've been putting out these short YouTube clips. I have to say, I think Bethesda's doing this is genius in my opinion. I love the marketing behind Starfield. The YouTube videos are animated, and they're little short stories on give you a little bit of insight background to the Starfield universe. I am even more excited for this game watching these short clips on YouTube. So, I know you're looking forward to Starfield. Logic, if you haven't watched it, I would highly suggest you watch these videos. They're actually really good and give you some more insight into the Starfield universe. So. Let's see here. There are a lot of things that cause Blockbuster's demise, include their own stupidity, but their willingness to adopt their business model didn't help them. I mean, that wasn't the big reason why, though, JD, why they went out of business. They actually did go streaming. But yeah, anyhow. I'm sorry here, Amp. I'll read the chat. I want to just make sure I didn't miss anything.
I mean, I won't say that.
What's that?
Nope, nothing. I'll keep that comment to myself.
Yeah, all right. I'm just going through the chat, see if anyone had a question for me or had commentary for me. I don't see anything else. All right. Well, Logic, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show because I want to go back and play some Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It is. I know you say it's too early to discuss Game of the Year contenders, but this is my Game of the Year so far, so I'm going to go back and check that out. By the way, Logic, I meant to ask you, I know you were a fan of Chromehounds. Have you seen some of the gameplay footage of Armored Core 6?
I have not. No.
Is that something you're interested in?
I mean, I don't know. I'm feeling very. I'm just feeling very kind of. I don't know. Sometimes I see things like I'm seeing in the chat go by in the gaming conversation. I just feel the need to go take a shower. I'm just kind of very. I don't know. Kind of
feels dirty.
I don't know. Very disappointed and very I mean, so no, I haven't been paying to a lot of gaming. I've actually just kind of logged out of that Twitter account, and I'm spending more time going back to kind of being a hardware reviewer like I was.
Yeah.
13 years ago or so, and really paying attention to mobile and some of the other things, and actually paying even more attention now to antitrust, anti-competition, patent, and copyright cases like I used to, just to kind of get away from some of the people and some of the way that it's being discussed in the gaming conversation.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. I mean, I haven't been on Twitter as much because the conversation there has just been pretty bad. It's really disappointing.
Yeah, you wouldn't have an argument about devaluation. That's my textbook case right now. Well, how the gaming conversation has been devalued, just on a downhill slide since.
Oh, I don't disagree, and I think unfortunately that it's been amplified because of certain I don't call anyone out specifically, but just certain shows that are out there, kind of amplify that, those conversations.
Yeah.
And, yeah. It's just
shows, Twitter accounts, alliances, etc.
Yeah. And it's for me, it's gotten to the point where I'm starting to question whether some people really love gaming. Like, do they really love it? Do they love the art? Do they love the creativity? Do they appreciate it? I don't think they do. Because I think if they really did, they wouldn't be talking about gaming the way they do.
I'll give one exemption for that, and that's the Nintendo fans. If there's any, we should just declare all the Nintendo fans as the true neutrals.
No, they are. They don't engage in any of the tomfoolery. They just don't. You don't see that. They're playing their games. They're enjoying them. And my view, I'm a little more slanted to one particular platform. It's consumer based, being a little more, I don't know, like being a little more,
in the majority,
tribalistic, I guess. A little more cultish. So. But again, to my point, I just I think that the case just watching some of the behavior, observing some of the behavior, commentary of this merger acquisition of ABK really kind of highlighted that for me, that there's people that care more about the corporations than they do care about actual gaming.
Right. One thing I have been paying attention to is I've been paying attention to the Google Pixel Fold, which I have to say is the best phone, probably arguably the best phone that I've ever used and tested. So it caused me to think back to like some of the. It's very close. It's very close.
Better than an iPhone.
Oh, definitely, unquestionably.
Really?
I mean, in my list of greatest phones that I've ever used, tested, owned, there's only right now. I only have one iPhone on that list, and that was the iPhone 6. So the first year that they came out with the, finally got off their duff and came out with the phablet form factor. I might put the 11 on there. But in my mind, like some of the greatest phones, I've used, the HTC Hero, the Motorola Droid, Samsung Galaxy Note. I'd probably put Galaxy Note 5 and maybe I can't remember which one was the bad year with the exploding batteries, whether that was the 7 or the 8.
I think
the comeback Galaxy Note. Would you think it was the 7?
I think so. What was a Note that had like the leather backing to it? It was almost like it wasn't leather. It was like pleather.
That may have been the 5. I'm not sure.
That was my first.
But whatever phone.
Go ahead, man.
Well, that was your first Galaxy Note.
Yeah, and let me tell you something. I loved it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd say the 5, and then like I said, the comeback phone after the exploding batteries, which they took a year off, figured that out, and then put out. I think it was the 8. But yeah, and then a couple of Windows phones, like probably the HTC Titan, and maybe the Nokia 920. I think I'd put up there. Okay. But yeah, this phone's super impressive. Battery life is great. It does some, I've been using the Galaxy Z Fold 3 for the last couple of years, and this is Google's own. It kind of handles some of the unique problems with being a foldable a little differently. And so, on the front screen, the Z Fold 3, it's an entirely separate screen. So what you do on that screen and how that screen's configured has zero impact on the way the phone behaves when you open it. But on the Pixel Fold, the front screen is actually replicated as the left side screen when you unfold the phone. Mm-hmm. And then your other home screens off the front panel become the right side screen, and then your additional home screens as you swipe right on the phone. So it just makes that whole configuration synonymous, and it doesn't make it an entirely different thing. And I think the most impressive thing, I could go on and on about the phone. I think the most impressive thing is the front of the Galaxy Z Fold is that really skinny kind of form factor, which is good for holding onto the phone, because the Z Fold is a very heavy phone, and I have death panic every time I'm holding the phone about dropping it, because it's an $1,800 phone. But this one is sort of squat and fat, kind of like the Essential phone was, and so like when I use this phone, I tend to stay on the front screen, on the front panel screen. I hardly ever unfold it, and that's actually good in terms of kind of my usability of the phone, because what it means is I only unfold the phone when I'm doing work or multimedia or posting on social media, and I actually need to like multitask and like put different apps on the left side screen and the right side screen. So yeah, it's a pretty neat experience.
Yeah,
super expensive though. Definitely not a phone for everyone.
Yeah, I think that now when you said it's not a phone for me, I see it's $1,800.
Oh, that's the entry level model too. I have the 512 gigs, so that's a $2,000 phone.
You have the baller model. Yeah. No, the one I'm looking at is the 256 one, not the 512. So yeah, it's 1,800. So, well, hey, let me ask you, like, because I'm looking at it like from the side here, like how thick is it when it's folded? Like, is it a pretty thick device? Like,
to me, it's not that bad. No, again, I'm just the type of person where I've never been bothered by phones. Like I've never been like there are some hardware reviewers, some mobile phone reviewers that are very, I'd say, kind of pretentious, that are always like, every phone doesn't need to be super big. These phones, I have small hands. Well, I've never been bothered by that. so it doesn't bother me. But like I said, I'll also say the short, squat form factor and the difference in the aspect ratio, which is closer to, I'd say, the Microsoft Surface Duo than like the Galaxy Z Fold, makes it so even though it is a little bit thicker, it's just not bothersome because it just kind of naturally fits in the hand, at least my hands. And you know, I think I've had one instance in the first, you know, week or so of ownership where I almost dropped the phone, but that's been it.
You know, OtterBox for that thing, man.
Well, it's and that's another thing too. Like getting cases for the Galaxy Z Fold, reliable cases, is really kind of a pain in the butt. Even though, you know, we're going into the 5th model of that, there were cases readily available for this. Like the one I have on it now is kind of a soft touch case, which is kind of a little grippy, which helps hold on to the phone. It just seems like there's much better kind of third party support for accessories, you know, like cases. I mean, there are no, as far as I know. And I haven't dug, you know, that far because, you know, I looked when I first got the phone, and then when I didn't see them, I didn't go back. There are not screen protectors for the Z Fold, but there were ones readily available, and even on the front panel screen, you know, I prefer tempered glass screen protectors. Mm-hmm. There are tempered glass screen protectors for the front panel screen on the Pixel Fold, and then on the interior ones, you could just kind of you know, the kits come with the kit I bought had a tempered glass for the front panel, and then the normal kind of film kind of screen protector for the interior screen.
Yeah. So T-Mobile, $1,000 off Google Pixel Fold right now.
Yeah, is that just off the top, or I assume that's with trade-in?
It just says get up to $1,000 off. Yeah, I think that's with trade-in. Google Pixel Fold via 24-month credits. That's a trade. Yeah, so they're going to give you credit.
Wait, so that's for the Pixel Fold, or for the Pixel Fold, or the Z Fold?
It says Google Pixel Fold. That's what it says here.
Okay, all right. I hadn't even dug around to see if it was on T-Mobile.
Look. Oh. Hey, let me tell you, T-Mobile.
No, that's not T-Mobile slander. That's like really when I was looking at buying the phone, I was like, okay, it's on the Google store, and then I only look for my own carrier to see if they were carrying the phone.
Yeah, I tell you, look, don't sleep. T-Mobile's a great provider.
I give you crap about T-Mobile all the time, but I would have. So there was a time, particularly for Android, there was a time where T-Mobile would get a lot of I think the original HTC G1, like the first Android phone. I think that was on T-Mobile. HTC used to do a lot of phones for T-Mobile. That then T-Mobile would brand as T-Mobile phones. So like I don't know if I don't think it was my first Android phone, but one of the Android phones I was on was the G2, mm-hmm. And that was a clamshell. Okay. I think it was a slider Android phone, and that was on T-Mobile. So I wanted to be on T-Mobile because at the time, like I said, I was a smartphone reviewer, and I just wanted access to, you know, different handsets, a wider array of handsets than would be on, you know, Verizon and AT&T.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're good stuff, man.
Yeah, it looks like it says $1,000 off when you add a line, but then it's also showing starting at $33 for 24 months, down today. Yeah. So I'm thinking there's probably some trade-in or something they're doing. I have the Jump or whatever it's called program for T-Mobile. It's part of the tier that I'm in. So I can upgrade at any point. But you know, if it is 33. I guess it's probably not for me. As much as and I wouldn't buy it outright. I probably would just subsidize, like do the $33 a month, whatever. You're right. I don't think I would use it. You know, I wouldn't use all that real estate. I just wouldn't. You know. My kids would use it, and that's probably scary. You know, I don't want them, handling an $1,800 device. I don't let my kids hold my Z Fold. Like they've come to me and said, "Hey, can I do this thing?" And I'm like, "No, not with this phone." So Logic,
you can hold the other phones, but not this one.
Yeah. So who's this phone for then? Like, what type of consumer is this phone for?
Okay, so this is my generic take on all foldables, right? And I've been engaged in these conversations on Twitter because my tech account is a separate account on Twitter. I can't have the gaming conversation over there. So, my feeling on foldables is there are three types of users who are would want a foldable or arguably need a foldable. People who are super OCD, right, and want those high levels of productivity for organization. Management and executive, power brokers in companies who, again, are using it as a business device, and people who are serial note takers is what I call them, which kind of dovetails with the OCD thing, but maybe slightly different phylums in the technology wilderness. But the only people who need it are people like that. Probably better cameras on the. Probably better cameras on the Pixel Pro. Probably better cameras definitely on the iPhone. Might even be better cameras on the Galaxy S. So I haven't had a chance to put this camera to that much use and really see how it compares against the. I don't have a Google Pixel 7 Pro. I have a Google Pixel 6 Pro. So I haven't had a chance to. I also haven't done the research to just dig through and see if these are the exact same lenses on the back of the phone, but obviously, you still have access to the Google software for photo processing. But in general, people who largely use their phone as a camera with cell phone connectivity, or and who use it for social connectivity, don't need a foldable. Like only like I said, super high end users who are wrapped around the axle about productivity, need it.
Yeah, that's not me. you just saved me $1,800. Thank you, Logic. Yeah. Let me get this super chat. JD Gamer, the $10 super chat. BRAP, Game Logic. Why weren't either of you giving all this smoke to Sony when they were running around buying all third-party exclusive, which Phil Spencer said was the catalyst for these mergers? You want to know why? Let me get
this one. So JD Gamer, first of all, we weren't giving all this smoke because that's a juvenile and immature approach to asking me a question, right? Maybe BRAP as well. Utilization of that term proves my point, right, about the large majority of the gaming conversation, that you guys are more worried about clout and brand representation than actually pulling apart these issues and actually having a business, technology, software development question about them. So I wasn't throwing all that smoke because I don't throw smoke. That's what people who are occupied with other things that are less than what I'm concerned about. The whole point that we've talked about on this show is because the tipping point for industry consolidation is a basis of size, scale, and proportionality of revenue and control in the market. The studios that Sony has been buying are smaller, don't have the same impact as Microsoft buying ATVI, doesn't cause the consolidation of as much power in a single block in the gaming market. So it's a pretty simple answer to your question, and one that we've described before.
Yeah, I was just about to. I had a similar response. I was going to say, because I don't use the word smoke. I'm not a look. I'm a 46-year-old man. I'm a professional. I don't need to use the word smoke or cap or anything like that, because, look, we said this on this show. We're just having a different conversation than you're having, JD Gamer. And that's fine. If you want to have that kind of conversation about smoke and cap and hold the L, there's plenty of other shows where you can have that kind of conversation. That's just not the level of conversation we have here. And frankly, what should be obvious to you is that there is a difference, which Game Logic just mentioned, which we talked about earlier in the show when we had Matt on. There's a difference in terms of revenue, impact to the industry. If you can't, the math alone should be obvious to you, JD, where you could see the difference in terms of what Activision does as a publisher in terms of its revenue numbers versus what buying a third party, exclusive does to the industry. They're not apples to apples comparisons. To suggest otherwise is extremely disingenuous, intellectually disingenuous, I might add. But I appreciate this.
Yeah, JD. I mean, as far as why we didn't throw that smoke. Same reason I didn't say anything about Microsoft buying Bethesda or any of the studios that Microsoft has bought since 2017, 2018. None of those were an issue. None of those were antitrust, anti-competition cases. The only opinion I've expressed on the matter is on the antitrust, anti-competition case as it was filed by the FTC. Yeah. And no, I don't want to have a conversation with you on an even playing field. I cannot imagine subjecting my eyes to literally bleeding out of my head by trying to have a conversation with you in real time. No, I'm not interested.
Yeah, I'm not interested. JD, look, I appreciate the super chats. I appreciate you coming in the chat and having a conversation. But I don't want you on the show because I've seen you and how you have dialogue in other podcasts, chat rooms. I see the conversation you have here. You're not interested in having like a critical, well thought out conversation. You're just going to come in here and you're going to say things like, oh, you guys didn't say this when Sony did this or blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not, we're not having those conversations here. Plenty of other podcasts.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, Go Light if you're referring to us and not wanting to smoke. No, it's not a matter of not wanting to smoke. And I've let me capitalize on a cliche that most people I think on this show have heard me say dozens of times before. I'm not interested in having a conversation with somebody who shows up to a discussion foaming at the mouth, slobbering all over themselves, using all caps in chat, obviously emotionally tied to the topic. I do not care who wins between Microsoft and Sony. I only care about looking at the dynamics of the business and pulling apart and understanding the whys. That's the conversation we have on here. I don't really need to adjudicate, on a weekly basis who's winning between Sony and Microsoft. Earnings reports come out quarterly. You can make those judgments then. Really, I feel like they don't really matter until you get to the end of the year and you can really make a greater holistic look at what's going on in the industry. But this pettiness of like you being wrapped around the axle about who said what about them. Like I've said it before on this show and I said it again on Twitter, like stop being wrapped around the axle about what little Tommy has and what little Susie got away with and who got a cookie when you didn't get a cookie. I don't give a shit, right? Like these are gaming topics. These are topics about the industry. They are business and financial matters. They are technical matters. They are artistic matters to talk about when we talk about the critique of games. That's just the conversation that we're having. You can feel free to disagree with it. I have no problems with that. As I've said 99 times on this show, the things that I say on this show aren't a matter of me asserting that I'm right. I've said many times they are starting points, and my hope would be that people would go off, that they would read, that they would research, that they would learn more. I really don't care about who wins and who doesn't win.
Yeah, I would. I agree, and that's the conversation, and we've said it here a million times. That's the kind of conversation we're having here.
And that's the reason I don't want to have a conversation with you, because you want to have a conversation to assert that Microsoft is winning or that Microsoft is more right or that Microsoft, I talk about these false and fake moral and ethical frameworks and rubrics that you guys use to apply because you want to assert that Microsoft is more righteous in their crusade than Sony is. I don't care. Like that's pettiness and stuff that I got over with a long time ago.
Yeah.
And you can be mad about it in the chat. Again, I don't care.
Yeah, JD, this isn't about for us. It's not about a matter of right or wrong. Like Logic just said, we're actually like pulling back, peeling back the the onion and trying to ask critical questions, understand why things are happening, understand the potential impacts. As we talk about the AB key deal, potential impacts to consumers, potential impacts of merger acquisitions, which is why we had the guest that we had today to provide a more informed perspective to the viewers here and to have that kind of high level conversation. We don't I don't care about who's winning, who's losing. And do I think I'm right? Look, sometimes, yeah. Yeah, comparatively speaking to like how other people present or how other people talk about gaming, yeah, to an extent, yes.
So
go ahead, Logic, yeah.
So I'll take it as a real question, right? Because I'll assume that it's genuine. Real question: Do you think you're right? And here's what I've said before, and we've said it on the show. and Matt kind of talked about these issues before, right? When you look backwards at the anti-competition, antitrust cases in this country, the vast majority have gone through. They have gone through at valuations even greater than the ones that we recently saw. My problem and concern is that over time, we have seen the rise of these particular 5 big tech companies. They hold vastly greater influence and power in society than companies that previously held those positions as the most highly valuated companies on the planet, right? We've talked through this before. My relationship, right, when the gas companies, right, were at the top of the food chain on Wall Street, your relationship with the gas companies is you go to the pump, you buy gas, you drive off, and your relationship with them is relatively over. Yes, we all have a dependency on gas and oil, but their overall influence on your lives isn't as impactful. When media companies have been at the top, that's probably the closest thing akin to these technology companies. But again, we weren't living in a time of smartphones at that time. Your relationship with those companies was when you turned your television on and turned them off, right? Or listened to a newscast on the radio, read a newspaper, whatever. Your relationship with financial institutions, right? Again, they held a lot of similar privacy information, but their relationship with you was still a little slightly more abstract, right, than technology companies have now. One of the things we've mentioned on this episode, right? Now we live in this world of smartphones, and I'm not an anti-technology guy, right? Let's understand. I own a lot of technology. I spend a lot of time hardware review.
Oh, I would say I saw the phones you had on your desk, so I would say that's completely the opposite.
Right. So
yeah, and you don't like T-Mobile.
I've given up my soul to Google. They've got all my information, blah, blah, blah. I often comment that I think the whole thing about Apple being the privacy company is a load of marketing bullshit, and it's not real, and I could pull apart why that's not real. As you can see, as they're making their foray into AI, it's not like they haven't trained their large language models not on your privacy information. So right. It's just a matter of that they kept it to themselves so that they wouldn't have to compete with anybody that they sold it to.
Exactly.
So, but my point is that we have a much more symbiotic relationship with these technology companies, all of the personally attributable data that they hold, our relationship with them, with both their hardware and their software products, which are in our lives all day. And I'm one of the people who's guilty of it. I have, again, just spend a lot of time here, sitting here talking about the Pixel Fold. I have my Pixel Fold right next to me. It's been next to me since I woke up this morning, and it's going to be next to me until I go to bed tonight at midnight or 1 o'clock, right? 19 hours a day. So the other thing is, along with that, because we've seen that rise in that size of the influence that they have on society, they hold, in my opinion, vastly more economic, financial, and social power than any company that's been at the top of Wall Street ever has before. And like I said, they've achieved that status on Wall Street largely through acquisitions, and largely through acquisitions we have not policed. So nobody said anything when Facebook acquired WhatsApp. Nobody said anything when Facebook acquired Meta. Nobody said anything when Microsoft acquired LinkedIn, right? And so I personally think that there is a greater degree of due diligence than has ever been required in the history of this country, arguably this planet, in monitoring the consolidation of these companies with the technologies that they utilize, the influence that they have to a much more invasive nature on the planet. The fact that Microsoft Activision was a gaming thing, again, I don't give a shit, right? Tons of people made a huge deal out of this because it was a gaming thing who have literally never paid any attention to an antitrust, anti-competition, patent copyright case ever before in their lives. And that's part of my problem with the handling of this on social media. I've been watching, reporting, writing, podcasting on topics of that matter since 2001, 2000, right? 22, 23 years. They are things that I've paid attention to, and things that I have a pointed opinion about. And so am I necessarily right? We live in a democracy. And so everybody's entitled to their opinion. Again, that's another one of my problems, right? Because I would say my impression of people like you and others is that you guys insist on somebody being declared right or wrong, and I care less about that. again, as I pointed out to somebody who tried to gaslight and make a big issue about the cases that I chose, judges make decisions all the time, every day, that I don't agree with. And I don't just roll over and say, yeah, I was wrong because a judge decided otherwise, right? I personally think it's time in this country for us to change how we're policing antitrust and anti-competition. I don't have a problem with the fact that cuts against the grain of history. We periodically review legislation and laws and how we interpret them in this country and make changes, as we have seen with a lot of the court decisions that have happened over the last couple of years that, again, I don't personally agree with. So there's the answer to your question.
No, that's a great point. I mean, and that's the other thing that people, don't realize, that that this isn't just about gaming per se. There's ramifications, precedents that are set here that have impact, and other could happen. Like, I think, like Matt said, if this thing gets appealed, it becomes case law. That would be case law that people would draw to, even for other merger acquisitions or consolidation or merger acquisitions in other industries too, not just gaming. If the Microsoft ABK thing becomes case law, these are things judges will look back at. And like we talked about in the show, like we can't think of an instance per se. We asked our guests this evening when consolidation has really benefited consumers. I think he gave out that statistics, like 70% of mergers fail. And if you look at that number, 70% of mergers fail, how's that really beneficial to an industry, to consumers? I would imagine that it's not. So it's not about winning or losing. I don't think we don't look at it like that in the show. We were trying to peel back the onion, ask those questions why, and provide a different perspective too. I think Logic. I think one of the things that I agree with you is that big tech and the power and influence that big tech has isn't the power and influence that like Exxon or Mobil had 20 something years ago. It's different. They actually wield more power and influence than those companies did. And so, like we're seeing, like we talked about earlier today, we're seeing with the SAG-AFTRA strike, the economics, the revenue models have changed in Hollywood, but the way that actors are paid has not. And those things need to change and need to evolve with the way the distribution channels have evolved. And I draw a lot of analogies to what's happening to Hollywood, to what's happening with big tech right now, and the need to maybe pull the reins back on big tech right now. And I don't think, I personally don't think that that's a bad thing. As a consumer, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, so I go back to JD. You're concerned about why I said I didn't want to have a discussion with you, because I don't want to have a discussion with anybody for which this is a matter of it's a problem for them because it's about gaming, because it's about Microsoft, because it's about ATVI, because it's about all the things that you perceive Sony has done. Like I said, I've never cared about the console war. I don't care about it to that extent now. I'm much more concerned about. Yet again, this is coming from somebody who's spent 30 years working in and around government and people who make policy, in the way in which it's carried out and executed. So I have a concern about that supersedes any of my concerns about gaming. And so I just don't want to have a conversation with people who are, again, having them on different levels for reasons that they're personally attached to that aren't concurrent with mine.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree, Logic. Then we get the super chat with Jeff B. Gaming with the $5 super chat. Thank you, Jeff B. Gaming. Appreciate the super chat. It says, I want Xbox to succeed by making great games and securing good time exclusives. Peter Moore, even Don Matrick did it. Why can't Xbox? I just different leadership, different priorities now. I think that's it. They would rather own than rent, I guess. Logic, I am a little disappointed that JD Gamer kind of hijacked my conversation about mobile phones. Because I wanted to ask you, we were talking about the Fold, and I'm like, but so I look, and this is just my last question to you, Logic, since we're talking about phones. FOMO's starting to kick in, man. I'm looking at my phone. I'm like, it's old. It's the I don't even know what I have now. The S21, I think. Now I want to look.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me look at my phone here real quick. I'll tell you what I have. I have the S21 Ultra is what I have. What's out now? The S23? Is that the latest and greatest from Samsung?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I just get an S23 or should I wait?
All right, so I'm torn about the S23.
Yeah,
I'm torn about the S23 Ultra, right? Because I was thinking through this the other day, right? I posted something on Twitter about like a lot of because believe it or not, there are some Samsung and Apple fans who have some of the same loyalism, that we see in the gaming community. Maybe not as bad, but. And I was posting that there's some of the Samsung fans feel like the Galaxy S20X Ultra line is the successor to the Galaxy Note, right? Because you have people who go that direction who are big Note fans. I'm like, no, the Z Fold is actually the successor to the Galaxy Note. It is the top tier, like number one, Samsung phone that blends everything that they optimize. Into the phone. I'm torn on the S23 because again, I get it. Like it's the top end Galaxy S phone, but then I'm like, but you're paying for functionality that you don't need, right? You're paying for the S Pen, and if you don't use it, I just question whether or not that person would have 90% of their needs met by going with the S23 Plus.
Yeah. But I've actually thought about, and I know I've talked to you about this before, but I'm actually thinking about maybe going back to Apple.
Yeah, I think it would be a good. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, like I did have the Apple iPhone 4. I mean, at the time it's still probably one of the best phones I've ever owned. Like I literally didn't have any issues with it, like never. And I can't say I really haven't had a lot of issues with my S21. But it was a great phone. But I guess for me, it's I think what ends up happening, at least for me, and maybe for other consumers, that you get comfortable in that ecosystem. And it's like, do I really want to like make the switch, And it's that perception of starting over again. And I guess I really wouldn't be starting over again if I, like with Google, if I save everything to the cloud, I could just, access it via cloud, right? On Apple.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, and again, I definitely look at these things through jaded lenses. Like, I don't feel like the swerve and shift is that big of a deal between, iPhone and Android. The big thing is if you're, and I don't think you're going to have this on Android. I don't know or believe that, there's any app that you're like, be religiously tied to on Android that you wouldn't have on iPhone. So yeah, I mean, I think you'd be fine making the shift.
Yeah, we'll see. I know Apple will be revealing their next iPhone soon, right? Is it September?
Yeah. So Apple normally goes in September, and then Google normally goes in October. So I've got one more slot that I intend to upgrade, and that'll be the Z Fold 3. And I think I'm going to bypass this year's Z Fold, I think. And hold out to see what the iPhone 15 has and what the Google Pixel 8 Pro has.
All right. Yeah.
But I mean, there's a good chance I'm gonna move the Z Fold 3 line to an iPhone.
Okay. Ryan Landis is like, BRAP, we're old. It's time to go back to flip phones. I know people who have flip phones still. Mostly the elderly, but I know a few of them that do. Now
you've got smartphones that are flip phones, right? Because you got the Motorola Razr and you've got the Z Flip.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about the Z Flip. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
which came out today. I mean, so Samsung had their Galaxy. Samsung had their Galaxy Unpacked event this morning at 7 a.m. Eastern time. So, So they just launched their Z Fold 5 today and their Flip 5 and new tablets. So the Samsung Galaxy Tab S9, 9 Plus, and 9 Ultra, and the new Galaxy Watch. So they went with a Galaxy Watch 6 and a Galaxy Watch Classic. And yeah, JD Gamer, I did. I was a huge Windows Phone stan. I followed, tracked, and reported the entirety of the Windows Phone drama, all the way to ELOP coming back to Microsoft, and then them shutting it down. And I lived that pain. I've lived a lot of Microsoft pain through Windows Phone, through Ultra Mobile PC, through Tablet PC, through the Zune. Yep.
So the other thing that I'm also interested in getting a smartwatch, and so like how do the Samsung smartwatches compare to the Apple ones?
Oof, man. So what I will say. What I'll say is, I've used a lot of smartwatches. I've used Fitbits. I've used Garmin's, which are normally my preferred. I've used the Samsung Galaxy Watches. I've just another device I have in that I'm using for review is the Mobvoi TicWatch 5, TicWatch Pro 5, TicWatch 5. So I eventually walked away from the Samsung Galaxy Watch line because mainly because, like, to me the whole so I think I'm circling around my overall thing. I went with I love the Apple Watch because the Apple Watch is so of all the bands, and I had the Microsoft Surface Band as well, which actually was one of my favorite watches. But the Apple Watch is a lovely device because there is nothing from a fitness watch, smartwatch category that harmonizes better with an iPhone than the Apple Watch. Like that is a synonymous system. Like it all feels like one ecosystem, and it should, right? Because it's part of the Apple vertical stack. But like on an Apple Watch, I've had problems, using Garmin's, using Fitbits. And so I eventually kind of got pushed to the Apple Watch because it was the only one where I didn't have software problems. Because with anything third party, like there was always like a nit of like, oh, it didn't connect to the watch this time. How much do I have to futz around with it in the morning when I'm trying to get to work to get it to reconnect to the watch? I got to unpair it and repair it and yada, yada, yada. So, but the Apple Watch, I had problems briefly with the Apple Watch Series 3 where the memory size wouldn't allow for updates, but they eventually worked that out. My biggest problem with the Samsung Galaxy Watch is you would think that it would work at its best and provide the greatest value when it's paired with a Samsung Galaxy phone, and I found that not to be my experience. I was like,
really?
I was like, this thing doesn't work any better than any other watch that I pair with a Samsung Galaxy phone. I have the same number of problems and sometimes worse. So yeah, it was just very frustrating.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a head scratcher for me Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a chance that I'll go back and try it out. But I've been very satisfied with the way Garmin's behave with Samsung Galaxy phones. And that's kind of my personal mainstay. But people who are very religious about the Apple Watch, they're very big into like app, utilization of apps on the watch. I'm less wrapped around the axle about that. It's mainly for fitness activities. And the other thing I care a huge amount about, because for me, I commute, right, is notifications. Rich notifications because what I constantly get is and way back in the day when I first started using smartwatches, when the Moto 360 came out, which was probably 2013, 2014, like my big thing was, look, if I'm driving back on my commute from work and the wife says, "Hey, I need you to pick up dinner," like that's a notification I need to see. I need to not drive all the way back home and then find out, oh, I was expecting you to pick up dinner, right? So, and I told you about like sometimes the text messages that I get are this machine gun pattern instead of like nice consolidated text messages, but that's another social conversation. But like, so my big thing is when I'm on the interstate.
About.
Yeah, right.
It's like
when I'm on the interstate, like I need to see those notifications, and that's one of the things I really like. The watch I'm using now that's under test is like I said, the TicWatch Pro. It's a 50 millimeter watch. It's another thing I don't have a problem with. Like I see a lot of these things about watches need to be smaller. Watches don't even. No, watches need to be huge, chunky, right watches for me personally. So this is a 50 millimeter watch. The notifications are really rich. I get a WhatsApp message or a text or an email or something that I could see. I can read through the vast majority of the messages that I need to, because next to fitness. To be quite honest, the most transformative thing about a smartwatch, and that I think is the most important thing, is the way it offloads you from all the crap, right? Because you get crap notifications on your phone that you don't care about, that aren't important, and you constantly have to lift your phone up and see the notification and pull the window shade down and swipe it away. But when you get the smartwatch, you look up, you see the title of it, you're like, that's not important. You just dismiss it, and then it's not on your phone, and you can go on about your life. But yeah, I mean, I do like the Apple Series. And if you are going to go iPhone, I would say that's a plus I would consider. If you're going to go iPhone and you're also going to get the watch, I think that's probably a better holistic experience than a Samsung. And the nice thing is I bought the most up to date iPhone right when I upgraded that line. But then I got like the watch from like a couple seasons back, so I didn't spend a huge amount right on the watch. And now they're doing kind of the same thing they do with the iPhone SE and the iPhone Mini. They will put out a new version of a watch that's at the lower end and doesn't cost as much. So you could go that way too.
You know what, Logic? I think we need to have more conversation around technology or devices, because I'm looking at the live chat here. Different conversation.
A little calmer.
Yeah,
a little less divisive.
Yeah, it's not like you got a Fitbit, that's trash. It's none of that.
There's those conversations out there too, though.
Oh, okay. Well,
there are charge polarizing. We've fortunately, I think largely we've moved past. I mean, back when Android was first coming on the scene, there were very vigorous fights about Apple more than Android. But now that we're into like the 15th, 16th iteration of these phones, everybody's kind of calmed down and realized. I mean, kind of what I always say, right, about the kind of the systems engineering approach, right? It's not a matter really of a product being definitively better than another one. It's just simply a matter of which product most fits the needs and requirements of individual consumers. And so people should just like what they like and go on about their lives. Why? Like what's weird in the brand wars is like you guys in the chat are fighting about Xbox and PlayStation, right? And maybe part of the thing to wind back is like what an Xbox is and what a PlayStation are is they're products that have been designed to fit somebody's requirements. So what you're really arguing about is you're not even arguing about the plastic box. You're simply arguing about the fact that you each like different things. And to me, is what kind of nonsensical argument is that? I'm gonna fight, yell, and shout at somebody because they like action movies and I like comedies. I don't understand that. I don't understand the point of that. And I further don't understand what anybody expects to win out of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you clearly haven't seen the McDonald's versus Burger King arguments, so those get a little heated,
That's true. Hey, we got to go out there and protect Popeyes from all the Chick-fil-A slanderers, right?
Hey, let me tell you something. I had Popeyes, the chicken sandwiches on Monday, and oh man, it was good. It was good. Now that's a real chicken sandwich, not that little like chicken patty they give you at Chick-fil-A.
You can't if you don't have sides, I just can't call you a chicken fast food restaurant.
Yeah.
But JD says one thing: the Fitbit battery life is absolute. Yeah, and I would agree with that. It's sad that what was the name of the company?
I think JD has
J something or other.
I think JD has a Fitbit too. I think he was saying that with Ryan, but
yeah. I mean, it's there used to be another company that used to do like a fitness band that it wasn't a smartwatch. It was just a band, but it linked with your phone and did all the fitness stuff. And they went out of business, I think. So they had a pretty good product. I will say, on this TicWatch Pro by Mobvoi, I'm getting about 3 days worth of battery life. So,
nice.
And that includes, one full day, what drains the battery on a smartwatch is when you're working out, right? Because it amps up the degree to which it's tracking
Gotcha.
all of your metrics and reporting those to the phone. So, that's 3 days. And one of those days was like a full, afternoon in the amusement park, walking some number of miles, and my heart beating fast on roller coasters. So the watch got a pretty good workout that day. But, like I said, I'm getting about 3 days worth.
Yeah, you know what, Logic? I do think we need to incorporate some. Seriously, all jokes aside, we should try to incorporate some tech talk here, and with devices.
Yeah, I'd be down for that. If that isn't like super offensive to people like Buck, who complain about us covering topics that are boring to him.
Well, Buck, this is a democracy. He doesn't have to listen if he doesn't want to.
And Froggy T. Wright, if
yeah,
I know we have the people who go to revolt and mutiny whenever we talk about PC gaming.
Yeah,
so I don't know if we get the same thing if we talk tech.
Froggy's like, it's better than talking about the same topic 60 times. Froggy, don't listen to the show. You see the title. Why are you here? Like this? Yeah. Well, any chance you review TVs?
I do not review TVs. I think you've called me for sales consultation on TVs though, but no, I don't actually review them, but I will take phone calls if you're standing in the middle of Best Buy wondering what you should buy.
Well, I did. It's funny you talk about like kind of brand wars or whatever. I've seen some interesting dialogue back and forth about people who are, like, I see what I call pro LG versus people pro Samsung now. Samsung has the OLEDs now, and they're actually. I haven't read a review of the Samsung OLED. I forget. I think it's called what's a Samsung OLED called? I forget the.
Well, they're doing the QLEDs too now, right?
Yeah, but what are they doing? Now I got to look this up because they put out a TV set that is really. Like it's on par, or maybe it might be exceeding performance of the LGs. I have an LG C1, and it's the best TV I've ever owned. And I've had plasmas. I had the when Panasonic was making what I would argue were the best TVs in the market at the time with their plasma series, and they took over the Pioneers. If you remember the Pioneer plasmas, which were really good but had really bad issues with burn-in. But yeah, I've had, the Samsung LEDs, which are really solid back in the days, the Panasonic plasmas. I thought the Panasonic plasma was the best picture that I'd seen, had great viewing angles. The C1 is by far the best TV. So I'll say this, the plasma TVs were great for, they were okay for gaming. But they were really good for watching television shows, really great for movies. The C1's the best all-around TV I've ever owned. Best picture, too. Great for gaming, great for TVs, great for movies, great viewing angles, very similar to what you have with the plasma television sets. So it's definitely the best TV I've ever owned. But the Samsungs, let me see the Samsung TVs here.
What I've been paying attention to on Samsung is so where my TV is in my family room, there's an angle from the sunroom that allows just a lot of light penetration in there. And when we initially put the TV in there, right, I got asked, are we sure we want to put it in here? Blah blah blah. And I said, look, the kids are the only people who watch TV during the day, and I wasn't as caustic about it, but I was like, I don't care if they have to deal with glare on the television. Like, who cares? And I'm like, the adults watch TV at night and it'll be fine. But now I am like a little more concerned about it, and now the QLEDs supposedly are people talk about them being the best TV to put in bright rooms because of the nit brightness. The nit brightness, yeah, is higher. So that's the technology that I'm looking at now. And Samsung, I think, is kind of leading the way on those. Yeah, the QLEDs run about, depending on what you get, the 65 inches is about $1,600. But it's their Samsung OLED. Oh, shoot. What's the model number? The S95C, which is highly rated.
It's actually for an OLED, it's pretty bright. I don't know. I haven't read the review, so I don't know how it would do in a brightly lit room. But my point is that Samsung's now competing with LG in the OLED space.
They've always had great display technology from their PC monitor base. And so you're seeing that spill over into TVs. One of the things I can't stand about Samsung's, though, is the stinking smart TVs, because it's constantly fighting with you to do automated takeover of stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to turn on. I will decide what input I'm going to use. I don't need you to prompt me to title it. Like, I don't need you any pass-through control from the television to the device. In the TV that I have, that actually I used to be the main gaming TV down here, and I just recently moved it upstairs. Like that's the mess that it does. Like, and I don't have to worry about it now because I don't have different inputs going in and out of that. Changing the inputs on it all the time like I used to down here. But every once in a while, somebody unplugs the Fire Cube or something from it, and then they're like, why is this on this input named game? Like, because it decided that's what it recognizes the Fire Cube as, and that's what it's gonna call it. And I just I'm looking at the QLED to solve the bright room problem, but I would really prefer not go with the Samsung. I just want a dumb TV, and that's we talk about phones today, and it's almost impossible to not buy a smartphone. Like that's the way I feel about TVs. Like I don't need a smart TV. I buy smart things to plug into the TV. I just need a dumb panel. Like, I don't need all your help.
Yeah. See, JD said you should really see the new G3's OLED black levels with contrast and brightness levels now approaching some LED TVs. Oh, wow. Yeah. And again, I think Samsung has been, I think that's one of the advantage of the Samsung OLEDs is that they are, I guess, from what I've read, brighter than their LG counterparts. But I just went to ratings, by the way, ratings.com, and 7 best TVs, summer 2023. The best TVs is Samsung S95B OLED. After that, for best home theater TV is the Sony A95K OLED. And best upper mid-range TVs is Samsung QN QLED. And best mid-range TV is the LG C2 OLED. Now, when I got my C1, the C1 was top on ratings for the best TV. So now it's Samsung with their OLED.
Hey, but sorry to pivot the conversation. The thing you've been asking me about Call of Duty Mobile, and so in conjunction with me kind of getting back to hardware reviews of mobile devices, I use my iPad Pro, iPad 11-inch iPad Pro 3rd gen. To play some Call of Duty this week, and it was a little off the metric that I gave you earlier, but still pretty much definitely in the clapping cheeks realm. So several MVPs that night. They used to give you your KD after each match, but I noticed that a while ago they went to just giving you this performance rating. But here's a match with me as the MVP, 87. The 2 other guys on my team on the podium with me are 68 and 68. Here's a rating. Me as the MVP, rating 90. The other 2 people on the podium with me are 67 and 84. Several game-winning MVP moments in matches. Here's me with an 81, with the next guy 75, the next guy 57. So yeah, pretty much smoking. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, you know what, man? You might be playing. You're just a sweaty on Call of Duty Mobile.
I apparently so. I'm a total sweat.
You might. People are probably rage quitting, throwing their phones down when
they're probably getting angry.
He's cheating. He's cheating.
Here's me MVP, rating 83. I think the next closest people on my team are like a 60 and a 51, and this was actually around we lost. The other team, their number 1 guy was 92, but there was nobody else close on on either of our teams. So pretty much between the two of us, we got like most of the kills.
Yeah. JD Game is saying the ratings chart that I just read is old. He says it doesn't take into account the new not Samsung LG G3 models. He says which are crazy bright. I'll have to check those out too.
Yeah, they have a G3 on. I only knew about the G2 or C2.
Let me take a look real quick. Here we go. G3 OLEDs. Yeah, they're out. 65 inch is about 3,300 at Best Buy right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
The T-Spy is saying Sony TV all the way for gaming, and if you love movies, man, I appreciate that brand opinion, but yeah, I just think about the world today and how far we've fallen from like the time when like Bravia TVs were like the thing. Like you ask anybody, hey man, what kind of TV should I get? And Bravia was like the automatic answer.
Yeah, you'd always go with Bravia. It was like by default. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Vega TVs. Yeah.
The Sharp Aquos. I don't know how you pronounce their brand, but they were also pretty good too before the Sharp got rid of their LCD division.
Yeah, actually, according to ratings, the Sony A95K OLED is actually good for the mixed usage. They gave it a 9.0. So 8.9 for video games, 9.2 for HDR movies, 9.0 for HDR gaming, 9.2 for PC monitor. That's the other thing too about my C1. As a PC monitor, it's pretty damn good. Supports both G-Sync and V-Sync. And actually, since my computer's right on my C1, I actually do primarily play on my OLED now.
Yeah, LG does good PC monitors too. So when I was doing 4K, both of my 4K monitors were LGs, and then before I went back to ultra wide, my first ultra wide was an LG.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to upgrade my TV probably next year. I'll move the C1 to the room where I had my 65-inch Vizio.
We had the Vizio?
Yeah, that got destroyed by my 4-year-old. So I'll do that. Hey, I've got some equity, man, to buy that TV now.
Yeah, well, that's your ROI for putting chips in the bucket, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Yep, exactly. You want to build a deck? Go ahead. We'll get the deck done around the pool. So, was Ryan saying, I remember way back to when I picked up a PS3, I bought a monster HDMI cable and it was $70. They're free now. And I remember spending I remember buying those monster cables for the original Xbox. They had like green mesh on them.
Yep.
They actually look.
I went in and bought a pair of those at Circuit City, which is no longer around anymore.
Not even around, yeah. You know what? I may have gotten mine at Circuit City as well. Yeah, but I remember picking those up for the original Xbox, and I'd say they were nice looking. They were nice looking. They look very high end.
Yeah, that's about all. That's about all they were. Was good looking.
Yeah. God, the Xbox, the original Xbox is such a great console. I know I've talked about it a lot on the show before, but one of my favorite, probably second favorite Xbox console, the 360.
Yeah, I mean, the 360 is is in my top 3 consoles of all time. Definitely, it's always depending on which day of the week you ask me. It's always a tiebreaker between that and the Dreamcast, and the Saturn is up there for me too.
Yeah, Saturn. Yeah, even though Saturn actually had some good games. So that's it for Tech Talk. That was a great conversation, though, Logic. Look, it's again. I mean, I look at the chat. I mean, I mean, that was great. Like everyone's kind of like, hey, the Fitbit, and now we're talking about Circuit City.
Yeah, if tech wasn't so expensive, we could have a tech podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could. We need to find someone to subsidize that for us. I mean, I would love if I could review TVs. That'd be fantastic. I would love to do that. Or GPUs, or CPUs. Yeah, speaking of PCs, this is gaming related. Ratchet and Clank is now out on PC. I'm thinking about. I might pick it up and play it again. I did watch Reforge Gaming play it earlier today. He was playing on a he didn't have it downloaded on a M.2 SSD. He's playing on a SATA drive. So you could see, like, while you're streaming, there were some hiccups during gameplay. And when you would like riff, there were some hiccups there too. So, but I'm thinking about trying it out, seeing just how it plays. It's actually a really good game too. I really enjoyed Ratchet and Clank on PlayStation 5 when it released. But I'm definitely thinking about picking it up for PC. It does have ray tracing. I believe it supports DLSS.
It has right now. It has ray tracing on NVIDIA cards, but ray tracing is turned off for AMD cards.
Oh, really? For AMD? Interesting.
Yeah, I believe they're turned. I believe it's turned off, or it may be a warning for you not to turn it on, because the game continuously crashes when ray tracing is turned on for Radeon cards. So right now, the game is tracking at a very positive rating by the Steam community. And again, if you don't know, Steam community don't lie. Always bet on Steam. Very positive, 83% right now. Surprisingly small number of user reviews, so I don't know. The game just launched today. It is the middle of the week. Could be just people haven't jumped on it, but that's what it's tracking as right now.
Okay. Yeah, that JD Gamer's asking if you've played Panzer Dragoon Saga RPG. I never played it.
I didn't play Saga, but my brother and I always harken back to the first day that I brought my Sega Saturn home and booted it up, because the first game I booted up was Panzer Dragoon, and I watched the introduction screen, and I stopped playing, shut the console down, took the time to pick up the phone and call him, and said, I forget what I did. I think I told it. I think the quote was 32-bit makes 16-bit look like Pong.
Yeah, I played Panzer Dragoon Orta on the Xbox. Was fantastic. And actually there's a couple sequences and fighting sequences when you're an icon in Final Fantasy 16 that were very, very Panzer Dragoon ish is how I would describe it. I'd love to see a remake of. I don't think that'll ever happen. I know Sega talked about remastering some of their old IPs. If they do that, that would be fantastic. But that's good. 83% on Steam. You're right. I mean, the Steam community. You're right. They don't lie.
Yeah, I would track it for a little longer into the weekend just to see if more people pick it up and see kind of how that rating levels out. So Ryan Landis is talking about Fry's Electronics, and so Ryan, when I lived on the West Coast, number one, my neighbor and I, we used to actually, it was a very big deal. We used to actually make mechas to Fry's. And we would, it was a whole event where we would take off on a Thursday or Friday, and he would have to get permission from his wife to take off, and we, pack up the truck and head up there, because we were, I should say clear out the truck, because we were coming back with stuff. So it was a great time. And then when I lived there again, where I had a Fry's in my town, I actually picked what apartment complex I lived in based on where the Fry's was, because my apartment complex was up on a hill and the Fry's Electronics was right down. So literally it was like a 2-minute drive for me to get to Fry's, which was just a very dangerous way to live. And then Corey Massey says, are you going to play Baldur's Gate 3 on PC next week? I don't know, Corey. Like I said, I'm actually kind of gaming less these days and gaming less on consoles and PC. So we'll just have to see. My general feelings about kind of some of the controversy and some of the buzz that I saw about it. I have played Larian Studios games. I've never finished one, but I've spent a chunk of time playing it. And then of course I played Baldur's Gate 2 back in the day, Neverwinter Nights. Completed Icewind Dale and the expansion. Played it co-op with a buddy of mine. So the lore and the background of that stuff, I do find those worlds interesting. I don't know. I mean, if you ask me who who do I wish was assigned to make Baldur's Gate 3? I would have preferred if it was Obsidian. But so I'm a little wary of the translation from those Dungeons and Dragons engine games to a Larian Studios game. But again, I mean, both are great games. I just don't know that those styles merge, so I'll just be interested to see how it comes out.
Yeah. JD Gamer says Panzer Dragoon Saga RPG was Sega's answer to Final Fantasy VII. Having played both, I would argue it might have been the better game. Isn't Panzer Dragoon Saga the RPG the one that's like the Panzer Dragoon game that's like $10,000 or something like that? There's a Panzer Dragoon game that's like very valuable, I think. I don't remember which one it is. It's like a couple grand or something, but anyhow. Yeah, I can't even think about Baldur's Gate 3. I was thinking about picking up, but I'm still going through Tears of the Kingdom, and I just can't. I don't know if I want to do because I think Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be like a 100-hour plus game. I think it has multiple endings, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I don't think the game is that long. Not if you mainline the campaign. I think that's the total amount of content or dialogue or something like that.
Yeah,
I mean, Baldur's Gate 2 also had a crap ton of dialogue in it. That's part of the thing that wasn't mentioned when that whole controversy ran around. It had a whole crap ton of dialogue in it, and then when they did one of the expansions or something like that, they actually brought the voice actors back in and they recorded more dialogue. So,
okay, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, Scott does say 300 plus hours with 1,000 endings. Unfortunately, that's 1,000. Is that true? 1,000 endings? So here's the thing. For me, it's getting through Tears of the Kingdom, and that's. I think Eric Jackson just finished it. I think he spent about 100 hours. And I'm trying to do more of the main line. I'm trying to stay away from the side quest stuff, but I have a feeling I'm going to get sucked into some of the side quest stuff because I'm really enjoying the game. So I'm trying to wrap up Tears of the Kingdom, and then Armored Core 6 comes out end of August. I'm interested in that. But then we have Starfield coming out, and I'm really excited for Starfield. And then after that, Spider-Man 2. So,
So here's my thing, and for Corey, I'm going to reveal a little bit about myself. It's not really a reveal. I've exposed myself before. I am probably arguing. I talked about different people's requirements, right, and what stimulates them, and this is a big conversation, right, in gaming that I actually love to have, but again, because of the console war stuff, I hardly ever get to have this conversation. I'm not personally stimulated by the point A to point B, get from beginning of a story to the end of a story. I actually get a lot more stimulated by the grind, and how much I like that loop and going on to the next challenge. It's one of the reasons why I stuck with Destiny 2 for a long time. It's one of the reasons why, like right now, I'm really digging Diablo 4, because I really don't care about getting to the end of the story. Like sometimes I go through and I play like main campaign story. Sometimes I do side missions. Sometimes I do another thing. I just like the grind. So for me, like one of the things that I find really attractive in game design is, how do you construct that grind loop, and is it enough to keep me interested and engaged for a long period of time? So Baldur's Gate 3, for me, it can be as long as it chooses to be. My question is, if it's going to be that long, is there a good grind loop? And is that something that I'm going to enjoy? Because I can spend a ton of time in a game. Like I spent a ton of time in the Division 2. I think I have like 60 or 70 something hours in that game. And I didn't complete the main campaign until I was like over like 57 hours. Right? Because just the grind loop was great for me. So to me, that's the real question that Baldur's Gate 3 settles on is, what is the grind loop like, and is there enough leveling and loot and that other kind of stuff, which I know are polarizing terms for some gamers, but that's just, what I need to hear about a game that's that long. I'm like, then the grind loop better be great.
Yeah, no, I think certain games I'm okay with grinding, but other games I kind of want point A to point B. Let's see here.
Yeah, and Fries was West Coast and Texas.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, so the West Coast in Texas had Fry's, and the East Coast used to have, I think CompuCenter,
I think,
and then I think the CompuCenter stores got maybe bought out by Micro Center, so we still have Micro Center around.
We still have Micro Center.
But yeah. But yeah, it was a hugely sad day when Fry's went out of business. Sad day. I was actually out in Las Vegas when one of the stores was shutting down, and was in the, and I just walked through, and again had all those fond memories of Fry's Electronics when I rode motorcycles at that point in my life, and would just go down there and stick my head in and walk around real quick, and then go get myself the big breakfast burrito over the other part of town. And so yeah, it was a sad day to see Fry's winding down.
It was sad to see Circuit City go out of business.
Yeah, at the time, funny thing, I wasn't concerned about consolidation. So I didn't key in on, but you really think about, what drove Circuit City underwater, and just kind of the dynamic where, it's quite frankly, it's amazed me that Best Buy has held on, as long as it has. But part of that was, the rise of Amazon, and the kind of the leveling of a lot of retail right in this country. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised Best Buy has been able to stick around because I think about Amazon. I've actually purchased TV sets from Amazon. They'll deliver them to you, and you can get them pretty quickly. You don't have to go to the store. But
Target has had its nit with Amazon for periods too, like where they wouldn't carry the Kindle in Targets because they were pissed at Amazon. So yeah, I'm kind of surprised sometimes that Target has held on too. But Target's a little more understanding because you need that local retail presence. But I guess maybe Best Buy has held on because maybe Best Buy is the new Radio Shack. And so with Radio Shack out of business, Best Buy is the place that people go to when they really need to procure stuff locally, and they're not willing to order it online because they either need it fast, or they don't they don't trust buying it without being able to talk to somebody, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe.
Corey Massey says I only bring up Baldur's Gate 3 because of the RPG game challenge you mentioned a couple of shows ago. Did I issue somebody a challenge to play RPGs? Or did I say I was RPG challenged? Or I can't.
Maybe you're
remember.
RPG challenged. I don't know. I have no idea. All right. Well, look, we're going to wrap up the show. It's 11:30. Actually, I meant to end the show like an hour and a half ago. But no, great conversation, Game Logic, as always. Big thank you to everyone in the live chat. Big thank you to our guests this evening as well, Matt Stoller, who was here earlier this evening to discuss mergers, acquisitions, and the potential impacts of the Activision acquisition by Microsoft. But please do me a favor, hit that like button, everyone. And if you're new to the show, subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. So, Logic, I don't know if you want to be found, but if not, I understand. I'll leave it up to you, good sir.
Yeah, no, my gaming presence is soon to be. I'll just fade into the background here shortly. So,
yeah, and then you'll return with a vengeance. Or maybe not.
That is unlikely. I doubt that out of all the times that I've retired, I don't think I'll be coming out of retirement back from this one.
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Yeah, you know what though? I seriously, I would like to cover more tech stuff because it was great seeing the dialogue in the chat.
Yeah, I don't have a problem, doing that at the end. I don't know that I'll always have something juicy to discuss.
Yeah.
But
no, we could talk about like Apple has their showcase, whatever coming up. We can talk about that, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Do me a favor again, smash that like button, and if you're new to the show, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. Let us know in the comment section below if you'd like to hear us discuss more, tech products or tech related news related to tech products. But other than that, we'll catch you next time. Thank you again.